Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 10 team selection and I've got 2 free transfers and I do plan on using them both in Game Week 10. If you are enjoying the content here on this channel or maybe you are new to the channel, please do consider liking and make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, very briefly, before we look at my Game Week 10 team selection, here's how I got on in Game Week 9, and it was a really successful week once again, post-wildcard. So that is now back-to-back green arrows, and in this week, I managed to break 100 points, which is the first time this season, and I'm now up at 350k, and if you remember, at the start of my wildcard in Game Week 8, I was ranked at 3.3 million. So I've pretty much taken 3 million off my rank, and I'm not far off the top 100k now. Very lucky couple of weeks. I will be entirely honest. It has gone very much my way. But to be honest, the first 7 game weeks felt like the complete opposite. So I will absolutely take some luck and some jam. And as we spoke about in the transfer plans video, FPL is a large amount of luck. Yes, you have to be skilled. Yes, you genuinely have to try and pick the players that are likely to get points. But you also need a hell of a lot of luck as well. And I'm absolutely happy to take any of the luck that I can get. And of course, the big risk that we did take on the Game Week 8 wildcard was selling Erling Haaland. Now, I don't want to go on about it in every single video, but of course, he will be a discussion point because he is the major omission. And thus far, it has gone very well. But I just wanted to very briefly discuss it here because some people are also considering it for Game Week 10. You need a few different things to happen for the no Haaland draft to go well, right? Firstly, you need Haaland to not go absolutely ballistic. And he hasn't thus far. In the 2 weeks since we've sold him, he blanked. And then he got 1 return and he didn't even get max bonus. So the first thing you need is Haaland to not go back to where he gets like back-to-back hat tricks and he's just getting goals and assists for fun. And so far that hasn't happened. The other thing that you need is your alternative captain to deliver. And again, thus far in the 2 weeks since I haven't captained Haaland, I've obviously gone for Mohamed Salah and he's managed to get me 62 points through captaining him in the last 2 game weeks. Now, that was very lucky. 2 penalties in there. I don't think Salah's looked particularly good in either Game Week 8 or Game Week 9. So a little bit lucky there that my alternative captain has delivered in both weeks, but I will absolutely take that. The third thing you need is, of course, by selling Haaland, you spread the funds around. So you need the players that you have picked by moving the funds around to also deliver, because otherwise, I could just captain Salah every week, still have Haaland and go for some cheaper options. So you also need that third aspect, where you need the likes of Trippier, Watkins, Fernandes, Bowen, the players that you've picked instead of Haaland to also deliver. And so far across the last 2 weeks, all 3 of those things have perfectly lined up to make this a success. But all you need is one of those 3 things to drop off and it doesn't look as good, right? If in Game Week 10 and 11 against Man United and Bournemouth, Haaland smashes it, Salah captain doesn't deliver, and the likes of Trippier, Watkins, Bowen, Fernandes, etc. start to blank, then it doesn't look so great. So I will acknowledge a large amount of luck across the last 2 weeks. I'll also acknowledge that I'm happy that I took the risk because I think it was basically a 50-50 decision for a lot of people. And I would just say it's not going to go perfectly every single week. The week that Haaland does score a hat-trick, especially if it's in a week where a lot of people captain him, if your alternative captain also struggles, I could be back down at 2 million in one single week. So please acknowledge the risk that you take by going without him and also acknowledge that thus far, no Haaland drafts have been very, very lucky. But also, we made a brave decision and it paid off. So I do also back that as well. Just specifically on Game Week 9, everyone returned other than Turner, Cash, Udogi. And this is what I was saying about all of the alternatives that I've invested the funds in doing well, right? Trippier and Watkins, it was very difficult to get both in if I had Haaland. So therefore, Trippier and Watkins delivering 2 weeks in a row now is brilliant. Obviously, Alvarez outscoring Haaland once again with a 9 points was really nice. And then, like I said, Bowen, Fernandes, Son, Salah, Maddison, that midfield was absolute perfection. Tons of points. Salah captain was brilliant. And it was nice to see Fernandes and Bowen getting the points because, again, those are the expensive midfield slots that is pretty difficult to get if you have some of the other premiums. So I look at this team and I'm absolutely delighted that I went with it. I'm having a lot of fun with FPL at the moment, but I also acknowledge that the week where it doesn't go my way, it could be pretty rough. But really happy with how the team looks. Let's discuss where I might potentially use those 2 free transfers and how we look ahead of Game Week 10. So guys, moving on to the Game Week 10 team selection. We are currently lining up in a 3-4-3, which is really nice. Not a 3-5-2 this week, because as you can see, I am benching my 5th midfielder, which at the moment is Bruno Fernandes, but we'll discuss how this probably will change to a 3-5-2 once I make my planned transfers. Team value is going up really nicely at the moment because a lot of people are bringing in the players that I already own. So it's not because I've made early transfers. It's just being lucky enough to own the players that other people want to own. And I do have 2 free transfers, as I said, for Game Week 10. And I'm probably going to use both. The reason for that is I've got 0 in the bank. So to upgrade any of the players that I want to upgrade, which I want to this week, you of course have to use the second transfer to try and fund that by downgrading another player. So at the moment, I am pretty confident of what my transfer plans will be unless there's a massive change. And I'll discuss those after I've gone through the team in its entirety. This is currently rated at 87% according to Fantasy Football Hub because they don't like the fact that I ditched Erling Haaland. And we'll actually discuss that when we look at their AI recommended transfers as well, because they still think Haaland is absolutely essential at the moment. But for me, I'm obviously slightly less convinced at the moment. Now, goalkeeper situation, Areola and Turner. I don't really love this, but I don't really like any of the goalkeepers in FPL at the moment. Even if you were to have unlimited budget, I'd probably go with someone like an Alisson if I had unlimited budget, but even he isn't really outscoring the cheaper goalkeepers. So I don't really love them. West Ham are actually quite poor defensively. They're one of the worst defenses in the league this season. So am I expecting tons of clean sheets from Areola? Not particularly. Am I expecting a clean sheet this week? Again, not particularly, because Everton have been okay going forward, and actually West Ham haven't been the best defence. But I guess I'm hopeful and optimistic, but I don't necessarily expect it. Turner will very, very unlikely feature for me again this season, just because I think sooner rather than later, he probably will be dropped. If he does continue to be first choice, though, there may be the odd game that I bring him in. But for most of the season now, or at least until I play my second wildcard, Areola will be first choice for me and he'll be in the starting 11. The back line, I'm actually really, really happy with, right? We've got Cash, Udogie, Trippier, Gahey, and Taylor. If I didn't need the funds to make an attacking transfer, I probably wouldn't make a defensive transfer this week because I don't mind that starting back three of Cash, Udogie, and Trippier. Gahey is absolutely perfect for future game weeks, especially from game week 11. I need Gahey in my starting 11 almost every week because in almost every week, one of Cash, Udogie, or the player that I might potentially bring in, or Trippier, have a slightly more difficult fixture. And I also really like him as a substitute option. So Gahey I'm absolutely fine with. And Taylor I just don't need to upgrade because my bench is already strong enough. So Gahey, Taylor won't be going anywhere. For Kieran Trippier, it's difficult because I do genuinely believe, which we'll discuss in this afternoon or this evening's video, and then also the video on Friday as well. If you are to sacrifice one of the big hitters at the moment, I probably think it would be Kieran Trippier, right? So if you're trying to squeeze in Haaland and Salah and Son and Watkins and Saka and Trippier and you're finding it difficult, I think Trippier is the one to sacrifice simply because the fixtures aren't there. I know he's hauled in the last 4 or 5 game weeks and he's done very, very well. But that was with the easiest fixtures, right? You've got like Sheffield United and Burnley with 2 of the fixtures in there. Once the fixtures get a little bit more difficult, clean sheets will dry up slightly, and so will his attacking returns. So I love Trippier. I will not be selling him, but that's because I've dropped Haaland, right? I have lost Haaland as the big hitters. But I think if you're going into this fresh now, I would maybe be tempted to keep Haaland and lose Trippier as the option that you potentially sell. But I know a lot of people like him, but now that he's up at 7 million, I don't think he's essential, especially with the fixtures coming up. One of the things that I do love about my team is that I don't have that headache, right? I just keep Trippier, and hopefully, fingers crossed for me, he does continue to return despite the fixtures getting slightly more difficult. Obviously, Wolves away this week is absolutely fine. So I have no intentions of selling Trippier. I thought I would just comment on the fact that if you are struggling, I wouldn't mind losing Trippier. I'd probably prefer to lose him rather than someone like a Saka, a Watkins, a Salah, a Son, or maybe even an Erling Haaland. Matty Cash, absolutely fine for this week, right? He's got Luton. This is now the nice run of fixtures that we get for Aston Villa. And his attacking threat has been absolutely exceptional this season. He has the best expected goal involvement out of all defenders in the Premier League. So Matty Cash and Trippier, tons of attacking potential for clean sheets as well. Good for bonus points if they get attacking returns too. So those two are absolutely going nowhere. Gahey's going nowhere. Taylor is going nowhere, which leaves us with the 5th defender, Udogie. Now, Udogie did come off early in the Spurs game, and apparently it was due to a bit of tightness or maybe a potential knock in game week 9. So I think, by all accounts, from what we've heard from Ange Postecoglou already, Udogie will probably be fine for game week 10. So I don't think he'll be an issue fitness-wise or injury-wise. And I don't actually think the Spurs defence is that bad. And I do see some clean sheets coming up for them. But the fixtures are getting more difficult now. And I don't think the chance for clean sheets over the next few is going to be as much as it was in the previous 3 game weeks when they've kept clean sheets, right? So it's a similar situation to Trippier that yes, Udogie is fine. Yes, he's got some attacking threat. But you have to remember that the recent weeks where he's got more of his points have been with easier fixtures. And the fixtures are starting to turn now. And in our teams, we have to play the fixtures game, right? We've got so many good players to choose from that the real edge is with the fixtures. So I do see Udogie as a potential player that you could transfer out. The other reason that I might lose Udogie is to make my plans transfer in midfield, which we'll discuss in a second, I may have to downgrade him. because I can sell him for 4.7 because I bought him at 4.5, and downgrade him to a 4.5 million pound defender would allow me to make the midfield transfer that I want. So unfortunately, not because I dislike him as an option or I think he's a major issue, Udogie is one of my planned transfers out this week. And I think at 4.5 million, which is the price I need, I think you've basically got Tsimikas before he obviously rises to 4.6, and then a West Ham defender. So at the moment, Udogie to one of those two will be my plan at the moment. And I'll discuss more about that in my transfer plans section. But I am genuinely really happy with the defense. If I didn't need to make a defensive transfer, I wouldn't. But at the moment, I do plan on downgrading Udogie because there is a midfield transfer I'd like to make. So moving on to the midfield, if you do want my opinion on all of the midfielders in detail, this week's Game Week preview video, which will be linked at the end of the video, or you can just find it on my channel. I spent 25 minutes talking about all of the midfielders in FPL at the moment, all the way from like Souček, Palmer and Adingra, all the way up to the likes of Son and Salah. I discussed Arsenal midfielders versus Spurs midfielders, and we did all of that in a lot of detail. So if you want a longer opinion on all of the midfielders at the moment in FPL, go and watch my Game Week preview video. But all of that to say, I'm actually really happy with my midfield at the moment, right? Mohamed Salah's going nowhere. At the moment in my team, he is the obvious captaincy choice. I don't really need to talk about him in detail because we know he's a brilliant, brilliant option, and he's even better at home. So whilst Nottingham Forest aren't a bad defence, I think this is a pretty good fixture for him. And obviously, I'm not going to be selling Mohamed Salah this week. Jared Bowen, another player that a lot of people want in their team. So Jared Bowen's going nowhere. The fixtures from Game Week 10 for West Ham are pretty good. His goal involvement and his expected goal involvement as well has been pretty good for West Ham as well. So I see absolutely no reason and no desire to sell Jared Bowen. The other three, I think there's maybe slightly more justification to sell just because either the fixtures are deteriorating or people don't think they're necessarily great options. On Son and Maddison, and I should note, I said this before the 14 and 9-pointer for them in Game Week 9, I wasn't a massive fan of selling Son and Maddison, despite the fact that the fixtures are getting more difficult, right? They've got exceptionally good data. We're looking at a 0.7 XGI for Maddison this season. And since moving to the number 9 role, Heung-min Son is putting up a 0.91 expected goal involvement per 90. And on top of that, we think Son is probably favourite for penalties, but Son and Maddison may well share penalties this season based on the quotes coming out from the Spurs camp. So these are two exceptionally strong assets with absolutely brilliant data. And whilst the fixtures aren't ideal coming up, I don't think that means that Spurs will stop scoring goals. And I still expect Son and Maddison to be good FPL options. So whilst obviously we really, really want Arsenal midfielders, and for most of you, your only route to the Sakas and the Martinellis and maybe even Ødegaard is to sell Son and Maddison, I don't like it myself. Now, if I were to sell one, I do maintain that Maddison's probably the one that I would sell. I just think Son as the number 9 is just ridiculous, right? He's one of the best finishers in world football. He's putting up the data to back it as well. So when you've got a player with exceptional underlying data that is also a prolific and clinical finisher, playing in an attacking side that create chances left, right, and centre, I mean, it's a gift. And if you chuck potential penalties in there as well, I just think he's too good to turn down. And yes, there are doubts around his fitness. And yes, he does appear to still be coming off around sort of 70 to 75 minutes. But in that time, he is doing such damage that it maybe doesn't matter as much. And even when you reduce Son's data down to per appearance rather than per 90, because he's not getting 90 minutes, he's putting up 0.78 non-penalty expected goal involvement per appearance. So even when you take into account the fact that he's not getting 90 minutes, he's still putting up elite data as the number 9. So for me, Son is just too good to drop. I would argue at the moment, Salah, closely followed by Son, are the two most essential players to own in FPL at the moment. So Son for me is going nowhere. I've had some considerations about selling Maddison. My main reason for probably not doing it is I do have Bruno Fernandes sat on the bench. And I just think if I'm to sell one of them at the moment, it feels crazy to keep Bruno because Manchester United, and even to some extent Bruno, just aren't quite clicking and they're not quite performing. And even in the recent games where they've got wins, it's not been convincing against the likes of Sheffield United and Copenhagen. Getting 3 points, yes, they've scored a couple of goals there, but I'm not inspired. And Maddison and Son and Spurs look so good at the moment. I don't think I can justify selling Maddison instead of Fernandes. The only thing is, from Game Week 11, Luton, Fulham and Everton for Manchester United, they are such good fixtures. And in against Luton in Game Week 12, I think it is for Fernandes, he's a genuine captaincy shout. So it is difficult to sell Fernandes ahead of those 3 fixtures, but I just don't think I can justify selling Maddison instead of him. So for me at the moment, especially because I have Fernandes that I can sell for an Arsenal midfielder, I won't be selling either of my Spurs midfielders. But Obviously, in Game Week 11, Game Week 12, Game Week 13, I'm not just going to keep double Spurs mids for the rest of the season. There will be the opportunity to move them out. But I don't feel the need to rush that in Game Week 10. And in fact, I know it was obviously it was away for Crystal Palace. It was Newcastle at home. But Crystal Palace were conceding so many chances against Newcastle. So I don't think this is the worst fixture, but I do think Palace are a stronger defence at Selhurst Park. So basically, to recap that, obviously Salah and Bowen are fine. Son and Maddison, for me, are going absolutely nowhere for now. But if I were to sell one, if you pushed me, I would sell Maddison. There's no way I'm selling Son at the moment. I just wouldn't do it. Whether it be for Saka, whoever in the game, I would be keeping Son in my team. Which leaves Fernandes, right? And the obvious transfer is to try and bring in Bukayo Saka. The issue is Fernandes did drop in price and Bukayo Saka is at 8.5. So I need to find 0.2 million if I want to go from Fernandes to Saka, which obviously means to do that, I think the only real way that I can see myself doing that in my team is to do Udogie down to a £4.5 million defender. And there are, like I said, either Tsimikas or a West Ham defender. I think either of those options works really, really nicely with my team. So that's probably the current plan. I would just say that I don't have to sell Udogie. And to some extent, I don't even have to sell Fernandes if I don't want to. I could just do Maddison to Martinelli, or I could just do a single transfer Fernandes to Martinelli. Or I could even, alternatively, leave my midfielders exactly as it is, have Fernandes from Game Week 11, who I still think is a great option, and just do something like Udogie to Tsimikas or Udogie to Gabriel, right? I could leave my midfield untouched and have a real differential in Fernandes for Game Week 11 and beyond. I just think I want an Arsenal attacker. I think both Saka and Martinelli in their own right are great options. Saka in particular, I do really want in my team. So the plan at the moment is to bring him in for Fernandes, but I do need to fund that by selling Udogie. So that's the midfield. Let's finish off with the three attackers and talk about those transfer plans in a little bit more detail. So moving on to the forwards, I'm very, very happy with my three forwards and no real plans to sell them at the moment because other than Erling Haaland, I don't think there are any forwards that get close to being as good as these three, right? So I'm very, very happy. Very briefly, Ollie Watkins, genuine captaincy shout this week against Luton at home. Villa are so good at home. Watkins continues to perform. He's very, very clinical this season as well. And he's a confident man. And sometimes form, confidence, things like this going on a hot run, they do matter. And at the moment, there's no stopping Ollie Watkins. So he's a genuine captaincy shout. Not for me, though. And the reason for that is the data's still not that great for Watkins. And I just feel like forwards have to do a hell of a lot more than midfielders to get a haul. Right? A goal and an assist for a forward is like an 11-pointer, whereas a goal and an assist for a midfielder can be a 14-pointer. Right? They get the extra point for a goal midfielder. They get the extra point for a clean sheet too. So I just feel like it's a lot easier for a midfielder to get a haul than it is a forward. So for that reason, I tend to favour, unless it is someone like an Erling Haaland, captaining midfielders. And I just feel like a lot of my other midfielders have quite high upside this week. So not for me, but I do love Watkins. Watkins would be one of the players this week, along with Salah and along with Son and maybe Saka, that I would try to prioritise getting in because the next three for Aston Villa are obviously very, very good. Alvarez, I think, is absolutely fine for the next 2 weeks. Unfortunately, if I do go ahead with that move of Bruno Fernandes to Saka, I think I have to bench Alvarez this week, which I'm not a massive fan of because Manchester United are not defending well at the moment. But I don't see another player that I could really bench in this team. I mean, maybe James Maddison. Maybe I play Alvarez instead of Maddison. But I think Alvarez is probably the most straightforward one to bench this week. So whilst I think this is a great fixture for him, it's one of the issues where if you do spread the funds, you've got a bit of a benching headache. I don't mind it. I think it's good to have that dilemma, and it's good to be able to bench players in slightly trickier fixtures. But of course, I could be getting an Alvarez haul on my bench, and that wouldn't feel particularly good. But I love Alvarez as an option, especially against Bournemouth in Game Week 11. Assuming he starts, I'm going to be very, very happy to have Alvarez in my team. And then we'll finish with Darwin. I think Darwin starts this one. I'm obviously recording this before Liverpool's game on Thursday. I think the ideal situation is Darwin gets 60 minutes and comes off and looks brilliant. Or he maybe gets 30 minutes from the bench and once again looks brilliant. But we have seen quotes coming out from Jurgen Klopp on Wednesday, which suggests that Darwin is looking really good. The only reason he was benched is because he came back late from international duty, and that he's looking really good at the moment. He didn't say anything about him being first choice, but the general vibe that we get at the moment is that Darwin is first choice. And I'm actually really happy owning him for the upcoming period. And if for some reason we're wrong and Darwin continues to get benched, it's not really a major issue, right? I'll just move Darwin on. It may even be that I sell Darwin all the way down to someone like an Archer, and that gives me the monies to spread around and maybe some money in the bank so that when I eventually want to bring Haaland back in, I've already got like 3 million in the bank and it requires less transfers. So Darwin's really not an issue with me at the moment. Whether he starts, whether he doesn't, I'm very, very happy having that price point and that player in my team. So, at the moment, that's the current team. As I said, we'll move on to my transfer plans in a little bit more detail now and my current watch list. But even if I couldn't make a transfer this week, I'm perfectly happy with it. But yeah, let's take a look at my watch list and the players that I'm currently considering. So guys, this is my current watch list. It's not really changed since the last time I presented it to you, other than just some of my transfer plans have changed slightly because now I'm considering selling Bruno, which means other defenders have maybe come into my thinking. And as I said, the only way that I can afford Saka is to make sure that he doesn't rise before I make the transfer. So I may well have to make an early transfer this week, but also moving Udogie down to a £4.5 million defender. So that is the current plan. And at the moment, there are only two options, which is Tsimikas, if again I do that before Tsimikas rises, so I may be forced to make an early transfer based on the price changes, or a West Ham defender. So I think the plan at the moment, unless Udogie gets close to a price change, or unless Saka or Bruno do as well, I'll probably wait. If Tsimikas is to rise, I'll probably just go for a West Ham defender. But my favourite option at the moment, just due to the upside there, and I think there really is quite high upside, is to go for Tsimikas. I think he's less nailed than obviously the likes of Zuma and a Gerd and Sofao, or Sofao's more than 4.5, but maybe like an Emerson. So I think he's less nailed, but I think the upside is definitely there, and I like the fixtures for Liverpool coming up. So the plan at the moment is to bring in Tsimikas in defence. As I said, the plan in midfield is to bring in Saka, but I absolutely love Martinelli, Matoma, and I do still really like Diaby as well. But I think if I weren't to bring in Saka, or maybe if I was to make another midfield transfer, I think it would be Matoma at the top of my list. Data's good, fixtures are brilliant. I think he's relatively nailed, and the injuries that Brighton have just mean that Matoma's probably going to be even more nailed than we maybe thought he would be. So, like I said, the transfers at the moment planned are anyway Tsimikas and Saka. I don't really need to make a forward transfer at the moment. The only one that I would really consider is João Pedro. Again, the injuries to the Brighton front line in March and Welbeck probably make João Pedro slightly more nailed, and I think he is a good cheap option. Maybe Ferguson gets more minutes as well, but I like my front three. I don't feel like Ferguson or João Pedro in is a massive upgrade on any of my current forwards. So, if we just quickly look, firstly, I thought this was quite interesting, at the Fantasy Football Hub AI recommended transfers. I thought you guys would enjoy this. Right, they love Erling Haaland. So they actually recommend that my two moves this week is Salah to Gordon and then Haaland in for Darwin. Now, the main reason they love this is not necessarily because they hate Salah, but they actually hate Darwin, right? They don't think Darwin's projected points are good enough due to his lack of minutes. So they really look at Darwin as a weak spot and think, who is the best person we could bring for Darwin? Well, it's Salah, and as a result, it's Haaland, and as a result, the only way to afford that is to sell Salah. The other thing that they recommend, which is maybe slightly more kind of standard and straightforward, is Guéhi to Tsimikas. Now, I don't want to sell Guéhi. As a result, it would be Udogie, but it is nice to see that they value Tsimikas as one of the better players to bring in. So, if we put all that together and look at my team now, with those transfers plugged in, the current plan is for the team to look like this. Right, Tsimikas and Saka in for Udogie and Bruno Fernandes. I'm not a massive fan of selling either of those, but I feel like bringing in Saka and Tsimikas is really, really nice. It gets me pretty close to what you would see from a Gameweek 10 wildcard, right? If you're going to drop Haaland on a wildcard, I don't think your team would be too dissimilar from this. My only concerns are two things. Firstly, if there are any price changes, I may be slightly priced out of this, so I may have to make the move early. In fact, by the time you're watching this, I may have already made the move, but I'll have to decide that on both Wednesday evening and Thursday evening before the Friday deadline. If there are price changes that are getting close, then I might have to make the move. So that's the first thing to consider. The second thing to consider is I don't like benching Alvarez. In future weeks, there is often a player with a much more difficult fixture that I'm happy benching. This is one of those where, yes, on paper, Man United away might be the best fixture to bench. However, Alvarez is great, and Man United's defence isn't fantastic. Despite the fact they're improving since Maguire's come in, I still like the idea of trying to play Alvarez. So it's how do I get him into my team? Do I bench Maddison? Not a massive fan of that. Do I bench Darwin in the expectation that he doesn't play? But I think he will. So it is pretty tricky, but maybe I just hope that Manchester United put up a decent performance against City, which I'm not really expecting. So that's the only concern at the moment. But when I look at this team, it's perfection, right? Other than no Erling Haaland, I love everything about it. And I am very, very happy that this is my team at the moment. Like, I'm really enjoying FPL at the moment. And I think this is a really, really nice lineup. So that's the current plan. Saka and Tsimikas in. If it changes, it might be a West Ham defender. If I'm completely priced out because I missed the price changes, it may be that I have to rethink the plan and find another way to get an Arsenal midfielder in. But I'm pretty happy with the plan for now. So guys, there we have it. That is my Gameweek 10 team selection and my current plan transfers with those two frees that I have this week. If you did enjoy today's video, please do drop a like and make sure to subscribe as well. And do tune into the rest of the content today and tomorrow. We've got a deadline decisions video this evening. We have a wildcard draft on Friday morning, and then we have the deadline stream on Friday afternoon / Friday evening. So do tune into all of that stuff. But until next time, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.